This is Cruise Radio.
I cruise a lot, and I always sail with travel insurance. You should too. Get a free quote today at tripinsurance.com.
Here we go.
Broadcasting from the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. This is Cruise Radio.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Doug Parker. Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Cruise Radio. Very happy to have you here, my friend. Coming up on this week's episode, a review of Norwegian Cruise Line's Pride of America over in Hawaii. And staff writer Richard Sims is here with cruise news. Quick programming note, if you do watch the daily cruise news today on YouTube, the daily episodes Monday through Friday at 7 a.m., and you're not subscribed, if you could, I would be greatly appreciative. Right now, we're at the time of recording, 99,000 subscribers on the dot. So if you'd like to subscribe, check out the show notes where you're listening to this, and you'll find a URL there. I greatly appreciate it in advance. All right, staff writer Richard Sims is here with Cruise News. Hey, Richard.
Hey, Doug.
Starting today with news from Carnival Cruise Line that could impact those traveling with kids or young ones.
Yeah, this is coming up sort of as a result of the cruise line trying to keep the out-of-control kids from being out of control. So starting on February 1st, Carnival's changing the rules regarding their stateroom booking policies. So as of that date, anyone who's under 21 will be required to travel with another passenger who is 25 years or older. Can be a brother, can be a sibling, can be a friend, whatever. But if they are under 21, they must have someone in their room who is 25 or older. The policy also now requires that children 14 and younger stay in either the exact same room as their adult guardians or a connecting room. And for teens 15 to 17, they can have their own stateroom, but it can't be more than 3 doors away from the adults they're traveling with. So congratulations. Now you have to do math when you're booking your cruise, and you have to have somebody break out a cruise, a ship deck map and figure out how many rooms and what numbers you can do. So it's a little more complicated. They're basically, like I said, they're made for 2 reasons. One is to help deal with the unruly behavior, and the other is to prevent people from doing things like cabin swapping in order to bypass rules regarding the drinks package. People do that sometimes. They'll put their, they'll book it as if it's going to be mom and dad in a room, but they'll switch it up and put like mom and son in a room. And so they're basically trying to make sure that you are in the room you're booked in and that you are following the rules, and also that you are in the room next to your kids so you can keep an eye on them. I mean, I appreciate this effort, but, I'm not necessarily sure this will do much in that regard as far as keeping the kids under control. I mean, let's say that under your new rules, you keep your 12-year-old twins in the stateroom with you. That doesn't prevent you as an adult from saying, fly, be free. You can't really force people to be good parents. They can leave the kids in the room, or they can, whatever. I get what they're going for. They're assuming that if the kids are sort of in the proximity of their parents, that they will be better behaved. But I think that's a better theory than it might prove to be in practice.
Mm-hmm. And one cruise line just bumped up their gratuities,
which, of course, leaves us wondering how long until some of the others follow, because that tends to be the way this goes. One cruise line sort of pushes the boundaries and says, we're going to raise gratuities. And everybody else says, well, okay, they took the brunt of the anger. Let's go ahead and do it here. This time it's it's Disney Cruise Line who bumped up their daily gratuities, with the standard cabin rate going up by $1.50 per person per day, which brings your total to $16 per person per day. But apparently, Disney thinks that if you can afford one of the nicer rooms on board, you can also afford to pay more for those daily gratuities, because concierge guests, that's a hard word to say in the morning, concierge guests are going to see a bump of $3.75 per person per day, which will bring their total to $27.25 per person per day. That means if you're staying in a concierge stateroom and traveling as a family of 4, they just added a whopping $763 to your total bill. And, I can't help thinking, and I think this all the time, obviously I'm a big advocate for doing what some cruise lines do, like Virgin, for example, which rolls the gratuities right into the price. So right up front, here's what you're paying, and that covers your gratuities. And I can't help but thinking that when they passed those regulations a while ago, that were meant to keep, hidden taxes and fees from adding to your price. And that was really talking about port fees and taxes and things like that. I kind of feel like they should also roll the gratuities into that, because it is basically a hidden charge. If you go and you're doing pricing for a cruise that you want to take with your family, and you see, okay, this cruise is going to cost us, $1,100 per person. That's our out the door price. And then as you're checking out, you're like, oh, wait, now there's this daily gratuity that is an additional $27.25 per person per day. That's a big chunk of change. So I really think that they need to adjust this and make that part of your total price, so that in the planning stages, it should be that when they advertise a price as being $12.50 per person, that includes everything, including your daily gratuity charge.
My question to you, though, because you travel in these bougie staterooms like the Haven and the Yacht Club, is $27.25, is that a lot for gratuities for a concierge level suite?
Well, here's the thing. So, I just did a couple of sailings in the MSC Yacht Club, which is, what did you call it? A bougie suite.
Mm-hmm.
And the daily gratuities were, I don't remember exactly what they were. They certainly weren't that high, but the one thing I didn't like was that you couldn't pay them off in advance. You had to pay, they put them on your shipboard credit once you got on board. I didn't love that. But I don't think that they were that much higher than those in the regular staterooms on that particular ship or that particular line. And I think that most people, and this is something MSC says, you don't need to do, you don't have to do, but I think most people who are staying in that level of stateroom tip the people. For example, I tipped my butler separately, at the beginning of the week and at the end of the week. And I think a lot of people do that. Even in regular staterooms, they tip them, like they'll slip them a 20 at the beginning of the week or whatever. But I do think $27.25 is a lot. And I mean, that's a $3.75 bump from where it was before. That's a lot. I do think that. I think that comes in high.
While you were talking, I looked these prices up. So right now, NCL for the Haven is $25 per person per day, and the Yacht Club is $20 per person per day, aside from the extra tipping the butler and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
And I mean, again, I feel like that is a form of deceptive advertising. I feel like, yes, you can go stand in a long line and get them taken off, but I also don't approve of that. I'm like, just pay your people what you're supposed to be paying them. Let us know how much our whole cruise is going to cost. Let's just make this as simple as possible, shall we?
In unexpected news, Celebrity Cruises made a major announcement regarding an expansion.
Yeah, they're going into a whole new market. And I have to say, I did not have this on my bingo card. But Celebrity Cruises announced right before their earnings call, we were all sitting around thinking, okay, here come the earnings call. Obviously, it's going to be good because all the cruise lines are doing very well right now. But what I did not expect was that they were going to announce that starting in 2027, they'll be entering the river cruise business. It's going to be and they aren't just dipping their toe in to test the water. They're diving in head first with a whopping 10 ships. They're introducing 10 new Celebrity River Cruises ships. In making the announcement, Jason Liberty, the president and CEO of Royal Caribbean Group, who, remember, owns Celebrity, he broke out the corporate speak. Let me quote him here. Quote, "By leveraging our valuable loyalty programs across our three brands, we will deepen customer engagement and further our ability to keep guests within our ecosystem of vacation offerings." And what that means in English, in plain speak, is that they basically saw a market they weren't serving and said, hey, we want some of that money. Now, here's what we know so far. There's not a lot of details out here, but this is what we know. Like I said, there will be 10 ships overall. It's worth noting that one of the things they said during the actual earnings call was that he said, and this is another quote, this is regarding the timeline of the ships coming out. He said, quote, "A couple of ships in 2027 and then about 4 a year." But he also said, I'd like to point out, because we are very intentful in our words, that the word put in front of this was initial order, meaning while they have an initial order in for 10 ships, they are planning on probably introducing more after these 10 ships. So there'll be the first 2 in 2027 and then 4 a year after that. And this is considered an initial order. He said, this is not a hobby for us. We are going into this space. As far as the size, there wasn't a lot of detail, but there was a reference to the fact that they would hold about 180 passengers. So that tells you what they're looking at. They also, the word they used the most often during not only the announcement of this, but really the whole earnings call, because this question kept coming up again and again. The word they used most often was elevated. There was reference to their most obvious competitor, which was kind of funny because the banker who brought it up said, I'm not going to say the name, but you have a competitor. And Jason was like, oh, you mean Viking? Like, they are very clearly, they believe there is plenty of room in the space for both Viking and for their new line of ships. So this is kind of exciting. I mean, this is not, and 2027 is going to be big for them because it's not only going to involve this, but they'll also have new regular cruise ships coming out. So they are making a big splash in the market.
Yeah, Viking has currently 80 ships that are river ships, and I believe they have somewhere around 60-ish long ships, so the ones that carry 150, 200 people.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
I had no idea they had that many ships.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see because, coming out with 10, that's going to put a little bit of a dent and have some competition in the market up there, especially in the Northern Europe markets.
It'll also be interesting to see where they put these ships and what routes they're doing. And one of the other things they said that was very interesting to me was that, that their initial efforts in this department would be in European markets. And by saying initial offerings, it makes me wonder if they might become, be interested in trying to do some cruises in the United States, So yeah. There are river cruises here, and it would be really interesting to see a luxury sort of offering like Celebrity is going to be rolling out, doing that down, like, say, the Mississippi River. I think that'd be really cool.
I just saw where American Cruise Line now has 10 vessels on the Mississippi River. Anymore, we're going to have a log jam, Pretty wild.
You're right, especially in those narrow areas during drought season.
Yeah. And speaking of Royal Caribbean, they announced a move that has some folks up in arms.
Oh, yeah. This never goes over well. So the original plan was for their new ship, Star of the Seas, to debut with a 7-night Eastern Caribbean cruise from Port Canaveral. And this was going to be on August 31st of 2025. So, of course, everybody gets excited and everybody's like, ooh, inaugural sailing. And they go and they buy their tickets and they spend a lot of money because inaugural sailings are almost always more expensive than pretty much anything else you can do. Well, now they've said that, in fact, Star of the Seas will enter service earlier than expecting. And they're adding what they're calling 2, quote unquote, showcase sailings before its previously scheduled inaugural voyage. Now, these are going to be paying voyages, which means they are actually the maiden voyages. The people who bought tickets for the original inaugural, yeah, you're still kind of on what they're calling an inaugural, but guess what? There's a bunch of people who are going to get on that ship first. So that's, now the second ship in their Icon class will start welcoming guests on August 23rd, which is 8 days earlier than those people who have booked on what was supposed to be the inaugural. Needless to say, those people are not happy. And I understand that. You want to be the first person. You buy an inaugural sailing for a reason. No doubt a lot of those people are going to be, people in the blogosphere and journalists and people like that who have paid to be on that inaugural sailing because they want to get their content out there as soon as possible, which obviously makes sense. And also just regular passengers who love doing inaugural sailings. Both of those camps are very unhappy with this, and I can kind of understand why.
But also, to add on to that, remember last year, I think it was last February, they announced a delay. So all the people that were booked on that very first sailing on August 17th got pushed to late August and now getting pushed again. So I can see the frustration for sure.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I've always said this is the problem with booking an inaugural sailing, also with booking something on a ship that's just coming out of dry dock, is those schedules can change. And when they do, there's really not a whole lot you can do.
And one European city is making it very clear that they don't want cruise ships or their passengers coming into town.
Doug, you're probably too young to remember this, but there used to be a series called The Little Rascals. And in that show, the boys had a clubhouse. I think the name of the boys' club was something like, the He-Man Women Haters Club or something. But they had a big sign that said, "No girls allowed." Well, the mayor of the French city of Nice would like very much to hang a sign that says "No cruise ships allowed" outside their city. He made a speech on New Year's Day during which he made their stance pretty clear, saying that cruise ships they quote, "have no place here," and that he didn't want floating hotels parked right there in front of Nice. While he wasn't proposing a complete and total ban, although I think he'd like to, his office is seeking to prevent ships carrying more than 900 passengers. This move, he says, will reduce the number of cruise ships and passengers calling on Nice by about 70%. Now, it's worth noting that the smaller ships, like the ones they want to continue welcoming, tend to have a wealthier clientele, which is definitely not a coincidence. There's no word on, when this might go into effect, although the mayor said they were already trying to cancel pretty much anything they could. Any cruise line that is trying to book in there right now, they are trying to cancel and prevent it from coming because they don't think. And this is something we've heard from other markets before, where they say, yeah, your passengers come here, they get off the ship and they wander around and they use our infrastructures, but they don't really spend a lot of money, as opposed to tourists who might fly in and be there for 3 or 4 days and they're staying in the hotels and eating in the restaurants. That is part of the complaint here. And I think that's also why they're okay with the smaller ships, because smaller ships, the people who come on those tend to have money to throw around in the various offerings within the city. So this is something we're seeing a little bit more of as over-tourism becomes a concern for a lot of these places that cruisers inherently want to go.
Well, and another one like Iceland too, right? Like they're adding that $18 fee for cruisers this year, and 80 cruise calls have pulled out of Iceland already because, and a lot of people are saying, well, who cares? It's $18. But what Iceland is doing, unlike Mexico, is Iceland is saying if you go to, I can't even pronounce the ports, but there's 4 major cruise ports there, you're going to hit $18 for every single port you go to.
Exactly.
So that adds up. And so it's not just one $18 charge unless you're just going to one Icelandic port. You're going to get 4 times 18.
Interestingly, this is going to have an effect that I don't think the port cities that are doing this actually had in mind. So, 80 cruise ships 80 calls are canceled to Iceland. Well, what that does is, because the law is supply and demand, that makes the ships that are going to Iceland, and that makes their passengers pay more, not only in fees, but because of the law of supply and demand, since there are fewer ships going there, it's going to cost you more to get on one of those ships. So this is not a great scenario.
Yeah, no,
except
certainly.
for the cruise lines.
And Villa V Residences, that cruise ship that's going around the world, that's had its fair of startup problems. I guess last November it finally launched. It's offering new ways to see the world on their ship.
Yeah, so it has, despite my belief that it would not, it did actually set sail. There are people on it. There are people having a great time. But it is definitely sailing far below the capacity they originally hoped, which is one of the reasons that they are offering these 2 new opportunities. So one is a seasonal ownership, and that allows, if you want to be on Villa V, but you don't want to spend all the money to buy like a residency for the next 15 years, you can buy points. And they basically, you can spend $25,000. It's $24,999, but let's be real, $25,000. And that'll get you 120 credits that can be used within that year. There's also an $8,000 annual fee. So with those 120 credits, here's what you can get. You can get 60 days in an inside cabin, 50 days in an ocean view villa, or 30 days in a balcony villa. Now, this is an all-inclusive price, and it's good for two people. So that actually, is like, if it was $25,000 a person, that would be a bit, of a bigger expense, but it's $25,000 all-inclusive for two people. It includes two passengers in a single villa, Starlink internet. This I love. One medical consultation. Like that's I don't know. That throws me for a loop. That among the things they're offering in this package is one medical consultation, as well as complimentary wine and beer during meals. So that is different to the full ownership with a 15-year contract that starts at around $139,000 per person. The other thing, and this is kind of cool, they're calling it their Try Before You Buy program. And let's say you're thinking about moving onto the ship, but you're like, is this ship really going to keep me happy for the next 5 years or 5 months or however long you decide to stay there? So what you can do is you can join the current leg, which I believe they're on a South American leg right now, for anywhere from 7 to 10 days. And that'll cost you $1,500 for a single occupancy and $2,000 for a double occupancy. And that, I think that's kind of a cool idea, because on the one hand, you're doing, that's not much more than you would pay for, probably less than you would pay for a regular cruise if you were going on, say, Norwegian out of New York or something. But it also gives you an opportunity to see what this life is like on this ship. You can talk to the residents and find out, do they regret having spent the money on a residency, or are they thrilled they did it? You really get a sense of, life on board. Heck, during that week, you might cross paths with someone who you absolutely hate. And you say, well, I'm not going to spend 15 years on a ship with that person. So, these are kind of cool new options for people who want to try it without actually committing to the full Gambino kind of thing.
Yeah, but doing some quick math, 25,000 for two people, that's $1,000 per day if you're in an inside cabin. Even if it does include Wi-Fi and such, still, I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely is expensive.
And for a 30-something-year-old ship, too.
Right, exactly. I don't know. I would like to do a week on board. Mm-hmm. I think it would be interesting to see what would life on this ship be like and for $2,000, that's a pretty low level commitment, honestly, to spend a week on a ship. Before we go to the question of the week, I just want to send a little shout out, sort of a self-congratulatory shout out of sorts, to say that, Doug, you are incredibly close to hitting the 100,000 subscriber mark on YouTube. And that is just an incredible, incredible thing. It's been really cool being a part of and watching you just become such a, force of nature in the cruise sector. So, if you are listening to this and you are one of the people who watches maybe the cruise news every day or comes to Doug for the ship tours and stuff that he does on YouTube, and you haven't subscribed, please do so, because it does help keep the channel going. It helps serve the content into not only your feed, but the feed of other people who might have similar interests. So yeah, congratulations. That's a really, really cool accomplishment. And I can't wait to be able to say, hey, we hit 100,000.
Well, awesome, and I appreciate that. And question of the week comes from Adam in Wilmington, Delaware. If you have a question, you can send yours in to Doug@cruiseradio.net. Adam asks, I heard that MSC Cruises has made some big changes to their drink plans. Any details?
Oh, yes, my friend. This is another story that has some people up in arms. So MSC has several levels of drink packages. Actually, MSC is just a little bit different about everything when it comes to booking. There's different levels you can purchase and blah, 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 and it's a little confusing. But one of the things that they have decided is that they want to basically follow the Carnival Cruise Line mode of saying, okay, when you buy the drink package, you get 15 drinks within a 24-hour period. People were not happy about this, to say the least. But then there was another twist that was fascinating to me. So what they decided was that when this program goes into effect, and I believe it's like April or something like that, it's not in effect yet, but one of the things they wanted to do was say, okay, if you are staying in the yacht club, once you step outside of the yacht club, any drink you have is going to be toward your 15 drinks per day. But any drink you have in the yacht club does not count toward that. So you could have as many drinks as you wanted in the yacht club and then go have 15 drinks elsewhere outside the yacht club. It was a very bizarre policy. And they very quickly turned around on that. Within a week, they were like, no, you know what? Drinks in the yacht club will also count toward your 15. So they are putting in place a 15 drink a day limit. But here's another thing that's a little weird about it. As cruise lines often do when they make these kind of announcements, they said that this was, in part for the safety of guests and, to make sure that people weren't over consuming and all of that, which is a lovely argument with one small problem. If you hit the 15-day a drink limit on MSC, unlike Carnival, and you want another drink, you can pay for it. So you could still easily overindulge. There are some people who would say 15 drinks a day is overindulging, but if you are not one of those people, you hit that $15 or that 15 drink a day limit, whether you're in the yacht club or hanging out in the atrium, and you're like, I still need another drink. You can buy it. So much for the argument that this is for your own health and safety and to prevent unruly behavior. It'll be interesting once this rolls out to see how this is all implemented. I suspect that before long, maybe even before they actually roll it out, they will drop that caveat of allowing you to buy extra drinks because, frankly, that is a money grab. Either commit to 15 drinks a day like Carnival has, or don't. If you're on a Carnival ship and you want a 16th drink, tough bananas. You can't get it, at least not on your own account. So that seems like a more reasonable argument that we are doing this for the good of our passengers, as opposed to MSC saying when you hit 15, you can start buying them. That's just a money grab, and I don't think that's going to last.
I have sailed MSC cruises quite a few times, and I'm not trying to speak bad of them, but it does seem like there's a lot of confusion all around their brand when comparing, just buying a cruise, a package, or whatever through other cruise lines.
It is. I mean, I've done 2 cruises with them now, and I will say both. I loved them. They were great. I had a really good time. Both were in the yacht club. I will say that if you can swing the yacht club, it's worth it. And it's important to note that you will pay significantly less to sail in the yacht club than you would in Norwegian's Haven or Celebrity's Retreat. It is significantly less. And frankly, I think, at least compared to some of the other suites I've stayed in, it's a superior experience. So if you can do it, it's worth doing.
Staff writer Richard Sims, thanks, buddy.
Glad to be here.
The world is constantly changing. Your place for news is still the same. Online and on demand at cruiseradio.net.
A big question we get at Cruise Radio is, how do I know if I need trip insurance? Simple answer. If you're getting on a plane, taking a road trip, or getting on a cruise ship, you need to have travel insurance. Hey, it's Doug Parker from my friends at tripinsurance.com. Not only does tripinsurance.com protect your vacation investment, but it also gives you peace of mind in case anything were to go wrong on your trip. How do they do it? They offer 3 different types of trip insurance policies. Good, better, and best. One policy for every vacation budget. But it doesn't just stop there. They're up to 40% lower when you shop around on other comparison sites. Plus, tripinsurance.com offers 24-hour customer support before, during, and after your trip, online claims assistance, and travel alerts to let you know what's going on at your destination. But find out for yourself. Check out tripinsurance.com.
Have a tip or a lead on a news story? Let us know. Email tips@cruiseradio.net.
Dr. Chris just returned from a 7-night cruise on Norwegian Cruise Line's Pride of America, all through the Hawaiian Islands, and he joins us on the show. Welcome back.
Thank you, Doug. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's been entirely too long, my friend. A couple things I learned before we started recording. One, you were born in Hawaii, but 2, you were supposed to sail this ship back, 20 years ago, and it never happened?
Correct. We ended up on what's now the Norwegian Sky, which was rushed into service because there was an incident when they were completing the ship in, I think it was Germany. So it got delayed. So this is now 20 years later, we get a sail on her.
That's wild. So give us some pre-cruise thoughts. You're on the West Coast, San Diego area. What made you want to hop over and take this 7-night Hawaiian island cruise?
So this was actually a makeup trip that we were trying to do last winter. And my son got sick just before we were to travel. So we had to cancel last minute. So we still had the desire to want to do it. We still had flight credits. It's the easiest way to see the islands. So we decided let's book it again and try to make it work. And so we did.
How was the flight situation like going over from San Diego to, I guess, Honolulu? Like, how long does that take? Is it an okay flight? And start there.
So we have direct flights out of San Diego, which are pretty reasonably priced. They were offering a $750 credit per person, though, because they needed to get 4 people off the plane due to weight restrictions. It's a 6-hour flight. It's really no different than flying to New York from San Diego, except that you're over water the entire time.
Yeah. And what kind of pre-cruise time did you do over there?
So we stayed in Honolulu for 3 nights, basically to let my son and our niece who traveled with us to see the island, go to the North Shore, do the shaved ice, do a luau and that kind of stuff.
You get to the cruise terminal in Honolulu. How was the embarkation process and how long did it take you from the curb to the ship?
So we rented a car. So we decided on our way to the airport to drop the car off, we would drop off our luggage and ended up dropping off my son and niece. And because my niece is in her 20s, we were able to basically sign permission for her to be the pseudo parent, like a child traveling with non-parents, so they could board the ship. And then we went and dropped off the car. But there was really no delays to drop off luggage. It went really well. Even getting into the terminal, once you got through security, we waited maybe through 4 or 5 people before we got to the counter. So it was a breeze.
With NCL in 2025, so you're still doing like face-to-face with an actual agent. You can't just I was on Holland America last week and it was just no interaction whatsoever. So you're actually talking to someone still?
We did pilot the Holland America system a couple of years ago in San Diego when we did the Koningsdam. And that was really efficient.
You make your way on board Pride of America. What were your first impressions?
We actually entered through the aft of the ship. So you basically enter a hallway. So we didn't enter the main atrium, but it was convenient because we went straight to the dining room to have lunch. Eventually, when we got to the atrium, it's very themed, kind of like the Capitol and the White House. So it's a pretty ship. They did a good job making it kind of an Americana type ship.
It's a different kind of design, right? So would you compare that to any other Norwegian ships you've been on in the past, or is it completely like a class of its own?
I would say it's a class of its own. It's the size of like the Gem or the Spirit, roughly. It's definitely an older ship design where you have decks that just suddenly stop. Or you can only access the ship from one side, or you have to go up a deck and then across and down. But once you figured that out, it wasn't too bad. But, it's a typical ship design that you might see in an older Carnival Royal Caribbean style ship.
Let's talk about your stateroom for this 7-night cruise. And were y'all all in one cabin or did you book 2 different ones?
So we booked a single cabin for 4, and then a week or 2 later, we're like, that was stupid. Basically 4 adults in a tiny cracker box room. It's a functional room, but Norwegian tends to have slightly smaller cabins than some of the other lines. And we had an obstructed ocean view cabin. And I noticed the one right next to ours was available. So we booked that for, I'm going to just call them kids to keep it simple.
Sure.
It worked out well. What was interesting is they were both the same category cabin, but the cabin the kids were in had like a love seat sitting area where ours did not.
How updated, being that the ship is going on, 21 years old, how updated were the cabins?
I think it got a dry dock just 2 or 3 years ago. So it was up to date, flat screen TV, refrigerator, USB outlets in the light fixtures by the bed. So I would say it was as modern as most cruise ships are today.
All right, well, let's talk about the dining on board Pride of America. And we'll start at the buffet area. How was the food selection there? And did it ever get really crowded during the cruise?
It did get crowded on mornings that we docked, everyone kind of going to get breakfast. But they do have a few options. They have the dining room for breakfast. They have what they call the Cadillac Cafe, which is like O'Sheehan's on some of the other ships. There was always a place to sit if you wanted to sit out on the back deck or in the, there's like a adjacent bar area. So it worked. It was fine. It never felt like I needed to run away because it was so crowded.
And how was the food in the main dining room?
I thought it was good. I mean, I know the Pride of America, even when we were on Pride of Aloha 20 years ago, often gets kind of dinged for food and service, but it was good. I had no complaints. We had some really good servers to the point that we started requesting the same servers every night. I always found something to eat that I enjoyed. There was a lot of repetition, so they always had some new items, but they recycled a few dishes every night.
Okay. And then any specialty restaurants?
We did one because it was part of the kind of incentive for booking. So we did Maderno.
And how was it?
It was good. We had done it on previous ships, including the Spirit, the Gem, and I believe the Bliss or Breakaway, one of the Bs. And it was as good as it has been there. The only difference I noticed, which was actually a good difference, is my wife and niece prefer their meat well done. And they actually asked if we had preferences for how the meat was cooked. So they just brought them a plate of all the different meats cooked well. And then we got it off the skewers, my son and I.
I was going to say, so they're still doing, just for clarification, in case the listeners don't know, Maderno is a Brazilian steakhouse on board NCL ships. And so I guess they are still bringing around the skewers of meat and slicing it at the table, or are they just giving you a skewer and it's your own skewer?
No, they're slicing it at the table like a traditional Brazilian steakhouse. And it's kind of interesting where it's located because it does have windows off the back of the deck, but it's actually... You have to go through the buffet, the Aloha Cafe, in order to get to it.
Is there other specialty restaurants on board? I know you didn't dine there, but does it have a good selection of them?
Yeah, it has your typical. It has the Italian La Cucina. It has the teppanyaki. It has East meets West, which the cruise director was mentioning how no one seems to be dining there, even though they just changed the menu. They have Jefferson Bistro, which is basically their French restaurant, and Cagney's.
Gotcha.
So it pretty much the typical Norwegian specialty dining choices.
How about any grab-and-go type places, pizza during the day at the Italian restaurant? I think Norwegian Sky has that one.
They had pizza in the buffet when it was open, but they did have the Cadillac Diner, which was popular, where you could go for wings and burgers and sandwiches and Moco Loco and milkshakes and whatnot.
Gotcha.
And that's 24 hours.
All right, well, let's talk about the entertainment on board this 7-night cruise. Now, this is a very port-intensive itinerary. So with that being said, how was the entertainment, whether it was in the show theater or around the ship with comedians and music?
It was good. I mean, they did a good job of, providing entertainment, even though there's probably less demand for the entertainment at night than on other traditional cruises. But they always had some kind of Hawaii cultural event, like lei making, a comedian. They had a magician. The only thing they really didn't have was production shows. But they did bring people on in some of the ports when we were there overnight to do hula dancing or whatnot.
Is that standard programming for Norwegian or for Pride of America with no production shows?
I don't remember production shows when we were on this route 20 years ago.
Okay. Makes sense.
It would make sense only because you're in port overnight in two of the ports. So there's probably just not the demand there.
Do you have any sea days or scenic cruising days on this one, or is it strictly a port every day?
Typically a port every day. We did have a scenic day because the waves were a little choppy, and the captain decided that it wasn't safe to tender to Hilo, which is the only tender port. So we ended up going back towards Maui, doing scenic cruising along the coastline and one of the crater diving spots, and then whale watching. So at least they, did something other than just floating at sea.
With that said, how were the sea days or the scenic cruising day as far as crowds and congestion around the ship?
It was fine. Actually, as I'm thinking back, I don't remember feeling like it was crazy busy. I mean, we went out on deck and there was plenty of, rail space to look out. We did one of the lei making activities, and that was more crowded, but still plenty of seats and supplies for everyone. So I would say she handled the crowds pretty well. I did hear from one of the servers that when she goes into dry dock in a couple of months, they are adding more cabins. So that might change the dynamic a little, but I wouldn't be concerned about, passenger volume and seating or anything like that.
And because it's U.S. flagged, this ship does not have a casino, correct?
Correct. It is a U.S. flagged ship. And because Hawaii does not allow gambling, as far as I know, that's why they can't do it, since they stay in U.S. waters. And what makes this kind of interesting is the shops are actually open during the day when the ship is in port.
That is interesting.
The only thing to keep in mind is if the ship's in port, you have to pay sales tax. If it's at sea, you don't have to pay the sales tax.
Ah, okay. Interesting. Did they have any kind of like luau's on deck during your voyage?
No, they had a suckling pig in the buffet one day, like a Hawaiian themed dinner buffet. The luau that they really push is in Kauai at the old Kauai plantation. And actually, price wise, it's probably the most reasonable of the excursions that they offer. They charge about what it would cost you to do it on your own.
Well, let's talk about the ports of call on this one. So you leave Honolulu. Give us your first port of call and the highlight.
Okay, the first port of call was Maui, and we were there for 2 days. We decided to rent cars in all the ports and use what's called Shaka Guides, which is a GPS-enabled kind of driving tour thing. Mainly, we did it so we had kind of freedom to stop when we wanted to stop, but also it was much more affordable. We got the cars for about $50 a day, maybe $30 in gas. And like the road to Hana would have cost us $1,200 through the cruise line.
Wow.
And about the same amount for the sunrise. I can't remember the name of the mountain. It was nice just being able to go around. We stopped at Costco just to see if they had something different, Yeah. I'm pretty sure a tour bus is not going to do a Costco run. One thing that is new to Hawaii from when I even was there about a decade ago is even for Diamond Head and, Pearl Harbor and all that, you need to plan to book it somewhere between 30 and 60 days in advance, because while you don't need a reservation to go onto the mountain, you do if you enter between 3 and 7. So
interesting.
Any other time, you're fine. But if you want to go there for the sunrise, you have to do it between 3 and 7. And it's definitely worth it. It's very cold. It's right about freezing when you get up there. But it is spectacular. And I'm actually surprised we were able to get the kids off the ship at 3 a.m. to make the trip.
Because of all the overnights you have on this itinerary, if you wanted to, and I'm not sure why you would because the cruise is pretty pricey, but could you stay at a resort at one of the ports, or do you have to be back on the ship at night?
No, you don't have to be back on the ship at night, and they keep the gangway open so you can come and go as you please.
Nice. All right.
When we were leaving at 3 a.m. for the sunrise, we actually saw crew getting off to go, I guess, explore, just get some time on land. So yeah, it's nice being in port overnight because you can do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about coming back late or missing the ship.
Yeah. No, for sure. You leave Maui. What was your next port of call?
It was Hilo.
Okay.
And there we rented a car and went to the Volcanoes National Park. That was the stop I wanted the kids to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so we used Shaka guides. We hit all the big sites that I wanted them to see. And then as we were at the overlook, we saw you could hike down to the crater of a extinct volcano. So we ended up doing a hike down to that and then back up.
And
it was erupting just not that long ago, but as we entered the park, they said there's no visible lava anywhere. When we sailed 20 years ago, they did a nighttime cruise by the volcano, and you could actually see the lava hitting the water at night.
Wow.
But they don't do that anymore, one, and two, there's nothing to see at the moment.
Yeah. So after... sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was going to say we did have our national park pass, so we were able to make it up to the sunrise and get into Volcanoes National Park without having to pay an entrance fee because we had that annual national parks pass.
That was Hilo. So what was your next port of call?
We were supposed to hit Kona, which was our only tender port. It was the port we didn't have plans for. We were just kind of going to get off the ship and walk around. It was our sleep-in day, if you will. The only thing my niece really wanted was Kona coffee on Kona. But about 7 a.m, the captain got on the PA system and said, we dropped the tenders. It's really choppy. We can't keep them safely secured for people to board because of them rising and whatnot. He said, the safety of our guests and the safety of our life-saving equipment are of top priority. So then he said, we're going to, redesign the daily activities. You'll get a new program. And then he said, we're going to do some scenic cruising and hopefully see something of significance. So I'm glad that they had a plan to do something other than just sit out at sea and do nothing.
What kind of marine wildlife did you see while you were sailing around? I know there's plenty out there.
When we left Maui, we saw a couple of whales playing. And when we sailed back around Maui, when Hilo was canceled, we saw, I think, one. We also saw a few dolphins as we were leaving Maui. And I don't know if, they're attracted to our wake or we use tugs in every port. So maybe that helps stir up some of the water too. But everyone I talked to that did the whale watch tour in Maui said it was phenomenal. They've never seen so many whales in their life.
And then what was next?
It was Kauai. And so we did Waimea Canyon. And then we did the waterfalls that were featured in Fantasy Island's intro scene. The next day, we did a plantation where you ride their old train that they used to haul the sugarcane. But we booked the tour that allowed us to walk through the plantation, which was really cool because as you walk through the plantation, they're pulling fruit off the trees and you're able to try it there fresh off the trees. So we got to try some pretty exotic fruit, and it was really good. We wrapped up about 1:30 at the plantation, and then we went and dropped off our car. Enterprises, who we used, they do not offer, I think they do for the airport, but the one we rented from does not normally offer transportation. But they did tell us when we rented, check in with us. We might be able to run you over there. They didn't have a shuttle, so they were just using rental cars to take people. It was going to be a little bit of a wait, so I looked to book an Uber. That's how we got there for like $15. And it was running $50 to go like 2.5 miles back to the ship. And luckily the manager heard me say that because I said, oh, we'll just wait. And he had someone come out from the back and take us over right that minute. He's like, no, don't pay $50. So I really appreciated their customer service.
So you leave port and your cruise is coming to an end.
Yeah, that's, the worst night of the cruise. Right. You have to pack up and have your bags out by 10 o'clock. But that kind of wrapped up the week.
How was the debark process and again, like getting off the ship and retrieving your bags on the other end and all of that?
Scary fast. They do the entire process in about an hour. Because there's no customs, they can basically, as soon as the luggage is lined up, they open up that color. And we were supposed to be off at like 8:40. I think the latest was 9 on the luggage tags, and they called us at least 20 minutes early.
Looking back here, do you have any first-time tips for someone sailing Pride of America or Hawaii?
It's definitely the best way to see the islands. I mean, but it is expensive. I could have probably done a 2-week cruise in Europe for a similar price. But we did price and look at doing like 2 islands on our own, but then you're spending a day flying to the island. You have to pack up again. And so, for convenience purposes, it's the way to do it. It really is. The only thing I would caution is if this is your first cruise, don't judge all cruises by this cruise. It's a one-off type of cruise. It's different. The ports are different. The crew is largely American. You're not going to have a lot of the traditional features like production shows that you have on other cruises, but it's a great cruise overall. I really enjoyed it, and I would not hesitate to do it again.
What was the biggest highlight of this cruise for y'all?
I would say the sunrise at the summit. And getting we found a wait staff, Michael Motherly was his name, who was just phenomenal. And we had a great time with him. He and the kids had a similar personality, so they kind of bantered back and forth. And it was just fun.
With Pride of America being a U.S. flagged ship, did you find there was any difference in service levels because they have to hire mostly American for the service and such against other cruise lines like Royal Caribbean, where it's mostly a Southeast Asian wait staff? Were there any service level differences there?
We did have kind of a rough boarding day lunch. The service was just not there, but you can't really judge service on the first day of the cruise because the turnover day is just crazy for everyone. I had ordered ice cream for dessert, and we just decided it wasn't worth waiting. We wanted to go to our room. And as I was walking out, the server did apologize, and he's like, "You want to take it with you?" So I'm like, "Sure." So, they make the effort. And yeah, I didn't notice anything that would disturb me about levels or quality of service. I really enjoyed it.
We were talking about the spotty reviews for food. Was it pretty solid for your party for the entire voyage?
Yeah, the only observation I had, and our waiter did say he's been getting those complaints, is the kind of everyday steak was a bit fatty, which, it should have been trimmed before they cooked it or whatnot. And even the ribeye, we had some onboard credit to burn. So we got the ribeye to share at the table. You can get the ribeye from Cagney's, just the ribeye for, I think, $25, which is a pretty good deal considering it's $60 to dine at Cagney's.
Yeah.
And that was it is a fatty piece of meat, but it had more fat than I have seen previously when we dined at Cagney's. But the next night we got 2 filet mignons from there in the main dining room, and those were phenomenal.
Well, in closing here, your final thoughts of NCL's Pride of America.
I don't think you can find a better way to visit Hawaii if you really want to experience multiple islands. It's kind of cliche to say it, but with a cruise, you pack and unpack once, and that makes it really convenient. And having 2 overnights gives you a lot of freedom to spend some quality time doing things you want to do.
We've been talking with Dr. Chris about his 7-night Pride of America cruise in Hawaii on Norwegian Cruise Line. Thank you so much for stopping by, my friend. It was good catching up with you.
Good talking to you too, Doug.
All right, Dougie, let's see what we got for you, buddy.
Cruise Radio is produced at the tripinsurance.com studios in Jacksonville, Florida. Get cruise news, ship reviews, and money-saving tips every Thursday on Cruise Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show. If you want to help spread the word, give Cruise Radio a 5-star review. Find Cruise Radio where you listen to your favorite podcast or online at cruiseradio.net. I'm your announcer,